Good evening. This is the March 2nd Ashland School Committee meeting. We start every meeting with a reading of our vision statement. Our vision statement is: the Ashland Public Schools is a forward-thinking district that cultivates the academic and social-emotional growth of each student through a supportive, collaborative, innovative, and challenging environment. Students will develop into self-motivated, resilient, lifelong learners who embrace their role as responsible contributors to a global community. This meeting is being recorded by WACA Cable TV. Our first order of business is to review the agenda. So we'll have time for public comment. Then administrative items will include the Ashland Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee appointing a school committee member to that other committee. Discussion about the logo, a presentation and approval. Then policy IKF, graduation requirements relating to community service. International exchange students tuition rate for FY23 and FY24. Student activity quarterly bank reconciliations. Approval of student activity club and account, the AHS Red Cross Club advisor stipend and student activity account. Superintendent's mid-cycle review. Superintendent's update, assistant superintendent's update. Warrant approvals. We'll have consent actions of the approval of minutes for February 2nd, acceptance of gifts and donations, the member updates, and action items. So just going through, I'm asking everybody to identify that they're both present and agreeable to the agenda. Paul?
Hearing yes.
Erin?
Hearing yes.
Tina?
Hearing yes.
And Lori?
Hearing yes.
Jim, you've got somebody waiting to be admitted.
It's spinning.
Oh, it's been okay. All right. So good evening, everybody. Our first item on the agenda is public comment. And I will say that we're aware that some people may have some comments to make about something later on our agenda, the graduation requirements community service. The time for comments would be now during the public comment period. And we typically allow 3 minutes for anybody who wishes to make a comment on that topic or any other that is within the jurisdiction of the school committee. So let me ask if there's anybody here who would like to make a public comment.
I would.
Who is that?
My name is Ed Mixtus.
Okay, Ed, thank you. Thank you for putting your camera on. Go ahead, Ed. Why don't you
Yes.
let us know what's on your mind?
I missed that last sentence you just spoke.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and let us know what's on your mind.
I just wanted to make a comment about the community service requirement. Certainly nobody would consider community service a negative thing in any way. It's great if kids can participate. I think requiring it for as a graduation requirement, arbitrary, can be difficult for some of the kids. I don't think you should force something like that on the citizens. I think it's something that should be learned from the parents, and hopefully they're willing to do it on their own. And the time and effort that the counseling staff has to put in to track all of this is got to be considered as well. So I don't think it needs to be a requirement. I would prefer to see it as a reward rather than a punishment. Not allowing kids to graduate because they haven't performed, the various services, and some of them are pretty minimal, but and the requirement to write about the activity when you turn in your form, it's certainly not a barrier that kids couldn't overcome. I just don't think it's necessary, and I don't think it should be a punishable offense by threatening graduation. So I'd rather see it rewarded positively. That's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And I should have said at the outset that for those not familiar with public comment, our approach is to hear from you. It's not a time where we're going to respond or engage in further questions. This is really just, as I said, an opportunity for the public to comment for our benefit. Anybody else? Mark DeSoni?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, and I would like to respond to this graduation. To take that off it's a person like myself who's gone through it lifelong is not a punishment itself. It's a way of being well-rounded and understanding of what the town is and how a person is, and to be good at. But because of the now society, our kids and parents not fully being persuasive or saying what citizen can do, or student can do to help and still be part of the graduating class, just because they understand what's going on doesn't mean they're well-rounded. And the community service should be a proud thing to do, should be a very positive, and it helps them down the road when, if they're helping others at high school years, when it's their turn to be helped, maybe another high schooler would be there to help them. I've done that for years. I've been the advocate of this citizen service and all that. But I'm also saying that parents, this is not a punishment. It's a character building for what it's worth to do. I've been involved with schools before. Everybody knows me from years past. I got plaques and stuff like that in the wall. Got served, got recognized for what I done. It's worth the town, give back to the town, because the town is not always going to be there for you. But if you can make the town better for yourself, family, and be proud of what you do, and have the family be proud of you, this graduating citizen service, community service, should stay and not be put away. That's about all I got for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I see St. Kerr had her. Do you want to come on up, please? If you'd start by introducing yourself, thank you.
I'm Kristen Brandt, live on Grover Road. I'm here for something else, but I would like to speak to this topic of the graduation requirement. I agree with the first speaker, which is it should be something that we're rewarding. It's obviously something that's really beneficial to the children, but there are so many barriers, many that within our privilege we might have trouble understanding, but there are barriers for people completing the requirement. And for it to be the thing, you've done everything else and you're not going to graduate because you didn't get this done. Maybe it's because you're working. Maybe it's because you're helping care for children. Maybe it's because you're working at a nonprofit. Maybe because you don't have transportation. Maybe because your parents can't help you with the requirement. There are so many reasons, and I truly believe that the school instills in them an understanding of the importance of community service, and I have faith that they are looking at a replacement, something that will do the job, while not putting this onerous burden on them, this stress on them, that again, like one of my kids knocked it out of the park, and the other one barely made it across, right? Like, and that's because everybody's different, and what the barriers are, I think it's hard for people to imagine, but I think we need to have some empathy about that, and recognize that there are lots of ways to teach service. This doesn't necessarily have to be the way to do it.
Thank you. Sean, did you want to speak?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you. I submitted some comments in writing, and I'll just echo those sentiments. I support the graduation requirement. I understand the equity concerns. I also understand the concerns about students just not doing it or just not getting it done. Neither of those, to me, are reasons to eliminate the requirement. They're reasons to revise the approach, to make it more equitable, but not to eliminate the requirement. But I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Joan, if you want to put your camera on and just introduce yourself. I should have Sean do that, but he has his name up there, Sean Adamek. Joan, if you want to speak.
Yes, sorry. I think my biggest concern about this is not so much whether the school does it in different ways or whether they require it for graduation as it is the integrity part of it. I was concerned to hear that some students are submitting hours, et cetera, and that's just wrong. I mean, I think that if that's the case, then that needs to be corrected. And I think that one of the biggest things, even bigger than community service, that we can instill in kids is integrity. And I also think that it helps them down the road. I think that gets them out of their comfort zone, and it helps them in the community and to understand the community. Kids are on their phones all day long, well, all afternoon regardless. I don't know if they're allowed in school anymore. But, and I think it's a great service for the town, and I think it's great for the kids. So I hope they'll keep it. Whether or not it's a graduation requirement, there needs to be some expectation. I think if National Honor Society kids can do 60 hours, or I think I heard someone say, then I would think that other kids can do 20, 25 hours. And I think that it helps them to get into college. So as far as it being helpful to people, I think that that's something that colleges look for. It's something that I certainly know that as a manager, that it's something that managers look for. So I think those are my comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Public comment going once, going twice. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your comments. And we will take up that subject in a few minutes. The first administrative item on our agenda is the Comprehensive Planning Steering Committee, the appointment of a school committee member to that committee. Mr. Adams, do you have anything on that?
Sure. So Mr. Herbert had asked that the town is going through a comprehensive planning process right now, and he would like the opportunity for a school committee member to be a part of that process. However, as he informed me, when the meetings are, they happen to be the exact same nights as school committee meetings. So that being said, he did offer an alternative. Is there someone that we would consider appointing from the school system that might participate in the process? That is an alternative that he's willing to accept, with the understanding that the group here most likely would not be able to do that because of the meeting schedule.
And my memory from the town manager's memo on this is it's a commitment of 18 to 24 months and monthly meetings. So it's
Correct.
You'd be meeting whoever, if one of us did it, we'd be missing every other one of our own meetings, right? So, so that's what we're presented with. Why don't we just start by seeing if anybody feels like that's something they want to do. So, anybody?
If it weren't the conflict with this,
Yeah.
then I would maybe consider it, but I would not. This is more important.
I can't hear you guys very well. I don't know if,
Sorry, Lori, can you hear me now?
yeah.
Okay, I just
Thanks.
said that I would be interested in it if it weren't the conflict, and I don't think we should shortchange what we're elected to do
Yep.
to do something additional. So, I don't know, we know of people that have considered running for school committee before they're very active in town, then maybe we could
I think right now, let's start with the school committee. It sounds like the next offer that's been made is somebody representing the district as a staff member.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so anybody else have different thoughts than Aaron in terms of participation?
Definitely.
Well, Mark, I was just thinking,
Too
like,
much.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
it sounds like we're headed in that direction with the discussion, but really the first thing to consider is, how important is it for someone from this actual body to be on that committee? And is it important enough for that member, like decide as a committee, not just having a member saying, I'm willing to miss meetings to go there, but as a committee, do we feel, losing the presence of one member is worth having somebody on that committee because that presence is important? Or is it equally fine to take the next step and have a school employee? So I just was thinking that we should decide that as a committee before people volunteer to go.
Yeah, I suspect, just reading the room, that I think we're probably all in alignment, Lori, with you that, this is where we need to be. But
Yeah,
if
I
people
agree.
have any opinions on that they want to articulate, please.
I would agree.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the meeting time is unfortunate. I brought it to Michael's attention that typically when we have things like this, we try to schedule them outside of the main bodies and their normal cadence, which would be select board, school committee, board of health, and planning board. They chose not to do that for whatever reason. I won't, but I've voiced that opinion that I think that the choice was poor because it precludes our direct involvement. But I like that they offered up an alternative. And I think as things go on, if, to Lori, I think Lori's point was a good one, that before we say, hey, is it okay for one of us to miss it? Yeah. How important do we feel it is? And it could be that something was important enough where, hey, missing some meetings might be okay. And I think as this evolves, maybe we would change. I mean, if this is a 2-year process, and we decide something right now that doesn't preclude us from requesting a change to that down the road.
I think a piece for me, I'm not 100% sure of what this comprehensive planning committee, what the outcome is going to be, and I don't want to say the enforcement of their plan, but how it's going to be implemented. I think it's incredibly important for the school district to have a voice in that conversation. Obviously, planning for the town is going to impact the school system incredibly, so I think it's really important to have that voice, whether or not. But I guess I don't fully understand the conversation and what the progression of the conversation is going to be to be able to think through whether it should be a school committee member or a member of the administration. As long as the school has a voice in the conversation, I'm okay with that right now. But
like, is this what we've just done for the last 6 months with Prem and like our strategic plan? Is at that level?
Yes.
Yes.
So then we need somebody there.
Yep.
If it's like what we're going through, then we probably, like you said, we need that voice there.
Yeah, I thought there was a little more to it that was sort of planning oriented, but I don't really understand it.
Yeah, I mean, so it's something that is by statute is driven through the planning process and planning board, but it is designed to help with with planning and just overall strategic planning for the town. But of course, that we're a big part of that. We're influenced by decisions that are made. So I do think that a voice is important. And Jim, when Michael mentioned that to you, do you have someone you think would be a good fit, or is that something we need to go back on and think about if there was a staff member?
I think there's a great fit. It's just a matter of whether the individual's up to doing it. I think, Mike is someone who would certainly have the ability to relay where we are from a school standpoint, been a part of the strategic planning process. He's a community member as well. Mm-hmm. And, we certainly could work around his presentations here at the school committee. But he's the one who makes the most sense, but I'm not going to speak for Michael in terms of saying, he should do it or needs to do it.
That's what I was thinking of too. But
well, right. I mean,
but I wasn't going to say his name either.
Right.
Would they give any thought
my job to say his name.
Yeah. Would they give any thought to changing the meeting date, or are these all set
I've
in
asked,
stone?
and they're set.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it begs the question. Like, I don't know what the availability of this room is. We can also have that conversation too. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it prior to now, but if we felt like it was that important, we could have a conversation about our ability to shift our calendars around. My guess is mid-year that'd be a challenge. Maybe by the fall, we could. Mm-hmm. We did that to accommodate me, as Paul likes to rhyme.
I didn't say that.
So Lori, did you have anything else before we kind of, the consensus is, it doesn't sound like there's anybody on the school committee that individually is willing to take their time away from it. To Lori's point, also probably not fair to our responsibilities as school committee members and to the district. So with that, turning to Mr. Adams, do you have a recommendation to make at this time? Do you want to confer with that person who hasn't yet been identified?
My recommendation would be to have Dr. Kyra go and visit the first meeting and to see if it's of value to him and to the process for the public school system to be part of the conversation. I think that's the first step, is for him to go and see what it's going to entail, before I would ask that anyone put in the considerable amount of time that may be necessary. So,
Okay, so it's an open meeting. We don't have to make an appointment now, right? So, Mike, do you?
Well, so Mike, what are your thoughts?
I'm happy to represent our school district in this type of work. It's something that I think is really important. We have to have a voice at the table here. I am also a community member. Obviously, I don't want to miss these meetings, as I think that these meetings are important. But if I have a presentation, then I'll be coming here for my presentation piece, and we'll just have to work around in terms of the scheduling piece. I can always watch these meetings afterwards if necessary, or if there's something in particular that you want me to be able to answer, I can provide Mr. Adams with all the answers that would be necessary for that particular meeting well beforehand as well. So I'm fine to do
We
it.
can also be smart about the more curriculum-based things to schedule it out on our first meetings, right?
And there's often times where I don't have a whole lot to present from my assistant superintendent's report anyways, such as this evening. So there are times when there's, it will work out just fine.
So do you want to check it out, Mike, before you make a decision on that?
I'm happy. I'm happy to be a part of it. If you would prefer that I go and check it out first.
no, it's okay.
That was your boss.
I was going to say no.
That's what I was doing.
I don't need to know. I enjoy this kind of thing. I like the strategic plan process, and I think this would be great for me in particular to be, involved here. So,
And I think not only from the school perspective, the community perspective, but also you've gone through processes like this with us, and so I think that's valuable too. So I would make a motion to appoint Dr. Kyra as the representative for the school committee and district.
And I would second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote. Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And aye for me. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thanks, Mike.
Appreciate you doing that. All right, next item on the agenda is the logo presentation and approval. This is Hesmer.
Oh, okay, it's already on here. Perfect.
Hold on, I thought I had it up already. Are we going back to just in person?
Never.
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay, you're not turning this light on, okay. Okay,
I think you might be able to run. I don't know if you can run it.
can I? No, okay. Okay, so, just wanted to present kind of the work that we've been doing. So, as part of a district improvement goal number 3, we've been trying to focus a little bit more.
Can I just because we've got some people, like members, introduce yourself. Just
Oh,
so
yes,
people
I'm
don't
sorry.
know.
Yes. Hi, my name's Esmeralda Casas. I'm the District Media and Communications Director. And so for those who don't know, I'm the first in this position. With that being said, we've been working on this district improvement goal number 3 to support the district's strategic communications. And part of that is the branding and the logo and just having a unified voice for our district. We've identified some action items that we've been working on. This was discussed a little at a previous school committee meeting, and various, is that me? Oh, apologies. Oh, someone asked to start the video. Okay, and so we've been working on a few action items. Some of these have been are ongoing. They're a work in progress, and some of them have been completed. You will see that we've been working with our weekly updates and our newsletters. And so we just want to give an overview of where we've been, where we are, and where we're going in terms of our logo. So with that being said, the next page is just a little timeline, like I said, so you can see where we are with this process. Within our talks, we've identified, I've had talks with school committee members, admin, team members, community members about what they think about when they think about Ashland Public Schools, right? What comes to mind? And a big part of that is our branding and our logo, the clockers, right? So where we are right now and what we've been using in the past. So these are the logos that we have right now in use, right? So as you can see, this is where we are. When, again, I'm the first in this position, so it seems that we haven't had one unified voice and one unified logo. And with that, people, community members, students, staff have taken it upon themselves to create their own identity, whether for their sports team, for their division, their department. And again, that's just because we've never had one central hub for this position and someone that says, hey, this is what our color palette's gonna be. This is what our logo is supposed to be. So these logos, you can see them in the same hallway. You'll see them next to each other on the same promotional item. And when you search Ashland Public Schools or Ashland Clockers, all these logos come up, right? And again, when we are recruiting new staff members or we are having new families kind of, hey, who are we playing? Or we're thinking about Ashland Public Schools moving to this district, what are they seeing, right? That is kind of what we want to work on, right? So we identified kind of like the logo that is the most commonplace. And that's something that my office with the superintendent's office worked on this last spring. Kind of just saying, we're not rebranding, but we're going to identify one logo that we like for now and kind of started working off of that. So we identified that, and this is the logo that you've been seeing on a lot of our items, on the budget book, on our website. And it's not, you know, this is the most commonplace one. I think it was created previously, and you have seen it on our letterheads. But we discussed how can we make this a little bit more friendly. Again, there has never been a central hub for the logo, so we don't have the right format. And as you can see, probably you, as parents, or if you've ever tried to purchase clothing, it doesn't look good on embroidery. It's hard to print. So we decided to work with a local marketing firm to make it more simple and scalable, but still keep the complementary color scheme. So we decided on Sundin Marketing. They are a local marketing firm, and also their CEO is also a local parent, so she has that background of not only is she a parent, but her kids are also on several sports teams, and she's done a lot of work with them already on the look and feel for them. So it was a great fit for us. She had some wonderful thoughts about how we can make this logo a little bit updated, but it's not going to be a complete rebrand, right? We're not moving away from who we are, the Ashland Clockers. So we started working for the past few months. As you can see, these are some of the logos that we started working with. We have a very good relationship, and we were able to talk and give feedback to each other about what we want the logo refresh to look like. We decided to go back to more of a block A, which you can see on the next slide. And again, keeping with our current logo, but just upgrading it a little bit so that it's easier to reproduce on embroidery, print. It looks good on the website. So we talked about these, and we kind of settled on version number 3. So version number 3 is what we've considered that it's not straying away from the logo that we have been used to. We've identified that we like the clocker blue. We have upgraded and removed the black, which makes it hard to, again, print or embroider, screen print, and things like that. And we've simplified the clock face, which gave us a lot of issues, again, when we were trying to print it and things like that. So we've identified this logo as a for now logo, right? We're not doing away with the brand identity that we have. And then we also will have the Block A to make it easier for like sports teams to use it on their uniforms and things like that. But again, it'll be one unified logo for everyone. Again, if you see back where we've been and where we are, there's just so many logos right now. And again, it's just because we've never had one central hub or one designated brands guide for people to say, okay, where do I go to get the logos? And so working with the firm, we will be able to have this logo in black and white versions, inverted colors, and it'll be in the right file format for whichever medium that our staff or students or community members want to use it with. So our next steps will be, like I said, if it is approved, or depending on which direction the committee wants to go in, we would begin using this and kind of start promoting it. We would launch the new logo hopefully by the next school year. And of course, this is going forward, so we wouldn't say like we're gonna take down anything that has the old logo. But as we're ordering new materials, ordering new uniforms, then this would be the approved logo that has to be used on things. And we wouldn't encourage anyone to go ahead and make their own logo. As you can see, the previous logos open up to copyright infringement. It's hard to produce. It doesn't make us look like one district. And that's really what we want. We want to say, you know, no matter which school you're in, you're still part of Ashland Public Schools. So the next step for today is just feedback on the logo, hoping for approval to begin using this. And then if this logo is approved, then we will work on the color palette and then the other file formats for the logo and the brand.
Thank you, Esmer. So open up to committee. Any questions, comments, thoughts? Lori, wave if you're going to chime in.
I'm saying if you want to have, you may be able to answer some questions too if they ask. That's all. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I know. Okay. That was really where I came. Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I know it's been a lot of work that's been done, so thank you very much for that, and very much needed, and I think it's good to have something a little simpler. The feedback I'd give, and I'm good with approving these because I think we need something for now, right? The two things that struck me about it that I was the clock face and how that represents. It looks like we tried to make it look like a cat or something, which I'd rather it be a clock face than a cat face, and I prefer the taller A. This seems a little squat to me. Like the previous one had a narrower top section, but I really love the work that you've done. So don't take the feedback as being I don't like it. I think it's been a lot of work. I appreciate all the work and thank you for doing that. So,
Erin, Tina.
So I guess at first when I received this packet, I was surprised because I was under the impression that there was going to be a larger community feedback and a contest or some sort of community engagement around the logo, and that hasn't happened. Because I actually 6 months ago spent a lot of time working on something to share, never did because I thought that day was coming, and then now we're here and I'm being asked to approve this. So I don't know what happened to it. Like I thought the high school kids were gonna have, like there might be like an art contest.
This is what we asked for. We asked for the stop. This is we needed something in the immediacy.
So this is only a temporary thing.
Yeah, well, correct.
Yes.
Right.
So
okay.
That's what she said.
Yeah.
This is to get us something that prevents the sprawl. So that is something that can be used and reproduced.
Okay. How long are you thinking that is a stopgap for?
However long it takes to complete the process.
My concern.
It's going to take a community effort.
Right.
So that's the point.
We're just adding another logo where we have like the main logo that is like the A with the block letter D shows with the black. And then this is a stopgap. This is going to be also, it'd be way too difficult to logistically,
Can you turn on your mic?
Yeah, apologies. to logistically scrub all of the logos that we have from all of the items that we have. So now we're gonna have 2 logos, and then when that stopgap is eventually finished after.
I think there are a couple of things. Ezra, why don't you, if you can, talk about what you think the time frame is, and if you have a process for that already, like, to Aaron's point, like where that opportunity for community input is, your timeline. But I also, to Tommy's point, I think you touched on this a little bit, but talk about what we're really going to be doing through this interim period and how this might prevail over something else that's out there now that I guess we want to move away from.
Mm-hmm. So I think that really depends on the investment that this district is willing to put in. A larger rebrand is typically like 18 to 24 months. If you're requiring the actual process, because there is like a color palette, there is the tagline, the mascot portion of it.
Yeah, Kristen, I'll come all the way up to this. Yeah, you can come right here though.
The mascot portion, yes.
Well, okay, let me start as a clocker parent and talk about when I hear stopgap, I'm actually thinking, are we the clockers? I believe that is part of the conversation that's happening amongst kids and school, right? Like, do we even like the clockers? So in my head, and I'm not saying let me start by saying I like the clockers. Okay?
I've never heard that. That's why I'm just sorry.
Oh, there are students. No, let me state for the record. We have had Catch the Blue Wave. That's a response to not liking the clockers. We have had we have the A's without clocks because people don't like the clockers. Like, so when you talk about a stopgap, in my mind, my understanding was because you were going to be embarking, and please tell me if I misinterpreted this, a full, like, community orientation to basically say, are we the clockers? Do we even get behind that? Because I can tell you, I do work with teams, and I've been told definitively, do not put the word clocker on this. Do not put the clock. And that's not because they're hard to, because I can put the clocker on, I can put the word on anything, but it's because it's unusual. It's and I think it's largely driven by sports, right? Is being a clocker tough enough, sporty enough, right? Of course, and then everybody goes, well, not the Hillers.
Because a Hiller is really tough.
Right.
I mean,
and I will say, I'm an advocate of the clockers.
Whatever the hell a Hiller is.
I like that it's rooted in history. I like that it is unique. I like that it was in USA Today as one of the most unique brands, high school brands. But I also understand that there's buy-in to that. You could be looking at 3 to 5 years. In my head, if you're talking about community input, if you're talking about surveys, if you're talking about research, if you're talking about contests, if you're talking about brand development. So you're looking at something that to truly do it, right? I don't think their stopgap is just to get to another clock. I think their stopgap is to get them through a position where you can't print it in one color, you can't reverse it, we don't have vector files, you can't shrink it, you can't expand it. They're trying to get through that so that they can buy themselves the space to make these informed decisions about, I mean, I'll be the first to say, I'm not sure that if you came to me and say, I'd like a logo for Ashland, I'd be like, let's put a clock on an A, right? It's funny, I didn't see cat, but I did see like hockey mask. Like it's very, and it just shows how subjective, it just shows how subjective this process is.
I see evil M&M.
I mean, it's very subjective. What I do like is somebody told me, like you told me, it looks a little mean, and I was like, I feel like that's an accomplishment because I think we're doing well there. So. That's my response.
In terms of the process, I think, Erin, I was under the same impression as you that we already figured out our stopgap, and that was part of the branding guide that we released or distributed earlier this year. So this feels like an extra stopgap, and then we'll do the rebrand piece. And so I guess it would be helpful to understand in more detail why we couldn't use the one you sent out in September.
You want to go back to that one, and I'll break it down for you?
Yes.
Yeah, so it was about the reproduction for.
Okay.
So let's,
ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
I just want to understand it better.
She's black, blue, white, and red. She is at minimum a 4-color imprint. Doesn't reverse, right? So if you reverse, the face turns black. You've seen those versions. As it gets smaller, the details start to go away. So see that little tail in the middle of the A, that little stuck in the middle there? Those kind of details start to shrink. So a logo needs to get real big, but basically, more importantly, it needs to be able to get real small. It needs to be able to print. These are like ideals. There are plenty of logos that don't match these, right? One color, reverse. How does it look stacked? How does it look horizontal? We also want to make sure that you avoid typesetting. And typesetting means we have the A, but then we type in Mendez School, Ashland High School. We actually want to have all those as set logos so that she's just got a file that's like EPS file, Ashland High School, Ashland Athletics, Ashland Mendez School, Clockers Rock, whatever. Everything is set so that we don't have slippage even there, right? Because that's what happens. Well, somebody put it all caps, somebody put it one initial cap and lower, somebody put, so we set all of that. So that way, then she has it in vector, which is EPS or Illustrator files. And that's the other problem. This logo does not exist in that file format. So it would effectively have to be rebuilt. And if you're rebuilding it, you should rebuild it
And
better.
what do you need that file format for?
You
Just 'cause
need
I'm
that
so-
for
I'm
anything.
ignorant
A
about what all this
vector
is.
file allows
printing.
for
Scaling.
infinite resizing.
Okay.
So when we worked with
Doesn't
the
get
Ashland
pixelated.
Youth Lacrosse several years ago, I helped them with that. They in part needed a vector file because they couldn't put the file. They had all been like they had a file folder full of images, but none of them could be put on a tent because it wasn't vector. And we have files, she's shown me, that say they're vector files, but it's really just a JPEG plugged into. And this is where I admit it gets real, like, kind of geeky in the weeds on file formats, right? And even I start to go.
Well, that's why I didn't understand any of it.
Yeah,
so this
no,
is
you
helpful
didn't, nor
background.
should you.
Yeah, this is helpful background. Yeah.
Right, but again, it shouldn't take a graphic designer to look at this and say, you know, or like I said, even when you as parents or like we're ordering stuff for the schools or the district, when the printing press or the clothing store is asking for the logo, the reason why we have it in so many different colors and variations is because it's not easy to put it on a t-shirt or put it on a banner, and they've had to create their own because when you're trying to invert it or you're trying to scale it, even on our emails or our website, you can see that it doesn't look good because it's so small and it loses everything. So like Kristen said, the stopgap measure is to help us have different file formats and help us make sure that this is easy to put on clothing. The larger conversation would be an actual rebranding of the school district, whether we want to be the Ashland Clockers and if we want to keep the clock on our logo. That is the stopgap measure. Because if we start getting rid of the clock face on the A, then we're moving to something else.
Tommy, go ahead.
Yeah, I think your last comment was what I had the question about. If we're not sure about the clockers and we are trying to put in a measure that will stop the spread, but also, you know, it's going to be something that is going to be welcomed by everybody. It's not going to be something that the lacrosse team will not put on any of their sweatshirts.
The lacrosse team won't have a choice.
True.
So part of this is about claiming our brand, right? And so in order to do that, we have to give them something that isn't expensive or difficult. And so that's part of the reason for all of those other ones. Now, they might piggyback on a reason just because they don't like something or they want to be particular. But in order for us to grab and own our brand, we need something that is usable.
Yeah,
that's what
I
this
don't
is
disagree
about.
with that at all. And I'm not talking about uniforms. I know uniforms are standardized; those go through the school. I'm talking about like all the other merchandise that teams sell. As someone who's been a team captain for 3 different teams over the course of my high school career, and I've also helped out with a couple others. I know that when you go to make a jacket for your team, you don't go through the office. You just kind of open up Custom Ink or another service like that. You make a design, and then
Not anymore.
you create something based on that.
But as a captain now, you would be required to follow this.
Okay, then going forward, that's fine. My question was, So you said you had helped with the lacrosse logo, right? It's the A with the slant. That's
Yes, but I did not design it. I was asked to make it a vector file.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
You're not claiming that one.
I'm not claiming ownership of that. Can I speak to two things you just said, or
Yeah,
you want
of
to?
course.
Okay. First of all, as an Ashland parent of Ashland High School, I have spent a small fortune on clothing because every year it changes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that is infuriating. And that is, I have to say, the benefit of brand standards and of logos. And in fact, we're working with the high school teams right now to set a standard using the ones that you set for a store that will reopen every year and that won't change. Basically, we've talked to the coaches and we said, but it is on the coaches, and I don't think that's right. Let me be clear. I think this should be going through the Ashland Athletics Department. And I've heard the argument that parents are paying for these materials. But I pay for sweatshirts at UMass Amherst. And guess what? They have never asked me my opinion about the logo that's on them, right? And I've never been able to say to them, I really don't like the color burgundy, right? But I pay for that sweatshirt. So I do understand kind of the back and forth having lived it. But I also own 4 Ashland lacrosse jackets, and they're all different. All from 3 years of lacrosse. Figure out that math. So the goal with the team was we were going to set a standard, set a design for both the boys and the girls. That's the other thing too, is the teams should work together, and the store will reopen every year, and the coaches don't have to redo the work because they're not designers either, right? So the idea is that one year we have a big buy, and the next year we only have a little buy because only the people who need new stuff get it. And then only the people who get new stuff get it. So that's ultimately the goal anytime when we work through brand standards. And even colors are such an important piece of this. We are blue, we are not red, right? We're blue with red. So, and I have a reputation for being a little adamant about brand colors, but when I looked out on the field or when I see my team walking by, I expect to see blue. I see black, I see red, I see whatever color people, so like these are all meant to help us identify and strengthen a brand so that we all feel like the Ashland Clockers, right? That's the whole idea of it. We could go to just the A, but that would be making a decision, right? If we get rid of the clock, and you just say, we're just going to do an A because that's simple, a lot of towns do it, you are in fact making a decision about whether or not we're using the Clockers logo. And then there's a whole conversation about, internal branding and people on board, the powers that be, being on board with being a Clocker. And I can't say this enough. I think being a Clocker is like unique and awesome, and apparently we used to be the Swampers, so we could go back to that. Right? Yeah, exactly. Things do change.
That sounds like you're beneath the Hillary.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're
you want to be, right?
I haven't confirmed that.
You're downstream.
Go back, so, thank you for that.
Can I, before you,
yeah.
I just wanted to see if Lori wants to get in here at all, since she's like reduced to about 2 inches on the screen. Lori, anything?
Thanks, Mark. I don't know that I have anything unique to add, but I'll just share my perspective. I mean, I do recall Jim saying from the beginning that this was going to be a years-long process. And I wasn't under the understanding even tonight that this was the end of it. I understood that this was a way to prevent what had been happening from continuing to happen while we continue our work down this road. So, I am comfortable with using something like this that sends the message. And I'm sitting here thinking about is there a policy that we need to draft almost immediately that says under which circumstances, you can use an Ashland logo, or is that a message that comes just directly from the superintendent? Is that a procedure? Is that a policy? So my understanding, what we're here to do tonight is, are we comfortable using what's being presented for the time being while we move forward and try to answer all these questions that are being raised? But I think the first thing we need to do is prevent what's been happening before we can get to the next phase of all this. So I'm comfortable with this, or even taking the clock off and using the A. I don't think that's not saying we're not the Clockers anymore. To me, that would just be saying we're not using the clock on the A until we're deciding further down the road. So for me, I could go with either one of those options, but I'm definitely ready to send the message out that this is what everybody needs to use.
Just to be clear, we're not being asked to choose one of those.
No, you get them both.
Right, the both of them.
Yeah.
This slide, we're choosing this slide as
Yeah.
as the representation.
So if I can speak to the proportions a bit, because you did mention the it is something to get used to. We have a very tall A, which makes it hard. A square is a big thing that we have to deal with these days. You've probably seen from a graphic design standpoint. So that A is actually a little problematic in that it's so tall. So we have squashed it.
I've had to try to get it on.
There you go, right? So we
within the
have brought
Facebook
it kind of
circle and yeah.
back into proportion. So, and I think the thing about, I totally lost my train of thought. What were we talking
You're probably
about?
going to talk about
We have
Facebook.
two logos, the block A.
The proportions.
Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay, so Aaron, I cut you off.
Yeah,
before I went. Go ahead.
no. So I've always called the clock with the thing.
Oh, the copyright, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Auburn
Yeah,
and
you do
Alabama.
have a huge problem
I know.
in town. Half of these are not you guys, right? Half of these are
Look at the trademark.
not.
It's Alabama.
Well, we've got Alabama. No, but I'm
It's the
saying
Atlanta
like
Braves.
it's
It's-
Ashland Youth Soccer. It's Ashland Youth, right? Ashland Youth Soccer that puts the soccer ball where the clock is, and Ashland Youth Softball that puts the softball where the clock. Which technically, this is for the school system's logo. I'm not saying we should be going out and suing people for using logos, but yeah, I certainly think encouraging people to use the logo is great because it makes us, again, one town, one, and you would do that by providing it as a resource, by having it available easily for people to download as they need with the guidelines of how to use it, and you will never control all of them, right? But we control what we can. That's the.
So to that point of the other things, would this be able to, would acceptable use clause be that the solid A could be over cross lacrosse sticks, hockey sticks, field hockey, a ball in the, like, can we also make a standard for our sporting that says a ball is gonna go in the lower right-hand corner and it needs to be this size, and sticks need to be of this size and square? Because
I don't see that.
Feels like a bigger rebrand, yeah.
I think that's more part of the
bigger piece.
comprehensive
well,
process.
people are going to use this, and then they're going to use it like the way Ashland lacrosse is. They'll put sticks on it, and
But there's only so much we can control, right? If this becomes a school department logo, then this is what we're going to do for everything that we influence, we control. It's going to take time to implement it, to kind of the point Tommy raised before. It's like we're not necessarily going out and buying everything new to put a new logo on it, or a temporary logo on it. As things turn over and need to be replaced, then we go with this model if we adopt it. But how long it takes to be able to get Ashland Youth Baseball, Ashland Youth Soccer, Ashland Youth Lacrosse on board, like, we can't control that. I mean, the most we can do is hope.
if you give them something that is a template, it makes it a lot easier for them
So-
to adopt.
I understand.
Yeah,
that,
so Ashland, that is Ashland Youth Lacrosse versus Ashland Lacrosse, right?
Right.
Like the high school lacrosse. So Ashland High School Lacrosse, we have come up with a design for the T-shirts that uses a sticks, but doesn't try to create a secondary logo. Because that's essentially what you're talking about, is a secondary logo. So having some kind of design palette, having a template to say for all the teams, right? That then what's going to happen is this kind of feeds down to the community. So as more kids see it, I think it'll start to feed down into the community. So if we can try to, really control what we're doing in the high school and the full school, then we have a good chance, I think, of influencing what's happening. But I do think we want to avoid a multitude of A's, because that's what we're fighting right now.
And my only other comment is, like, so I call him Swoopy.
I love it.
Swoopy, I feel like, I'm so sorry. I know how hard you've worked, and I worked on
Very
Bris.
subjective, so I don't take it personally.
Swoopy needs to die. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, you're talking
And this is the
about
feedback I get from a lot of
this is-
friends. The clock faces.
The job was not to redesign the logo. You're absolutely, again, if,
You wouldn't
if
have done
you
this
said
if-
to me,
exactly.
create a logo for the Clockers,
Yeah.
would I come up with a clock that's flying in front of an A? Likely not, right?
Yeah.
So the job was respect the current logo, modernize it to a point it's recognizable, but also works better. So, and I have a student in my house, and she and I did look at it quite a bit, and and I mean, I think her reaction was about right. Yeah, it's fine. Great. That's, I mean, honestly, what I was looking for.
I would, if we're gonna stick with a clock and a clock face, my only change is I would like the time on the clock to read 6:46 or 1846. It's when the town started. So in 1846 in military time is 6:46. So you can position the clock hands that way, and I would lose.
Yeah.
She has glasses, yeah.
I would lose the glasses.
Isn't one of the hands the glasses now?
One of the hands is like his
The-
nose and the glasses.
He
They
has
are-
to
yeah,
smile.
I mean, we
Yeah.
purposely kept those
Wait, can you go back?
separate.
Sure.
Jen, go back to the other.
I think the next step will be to take whatever feedback we get and see if it's able to be incorporated.
So I guess here's my opinion. I mean, we've emphasized communication and communication standards for a lot of different reasons. At the core of all that, to me, is creating a more professional, more consistent look. This is a step in that process to me. It's not the end of it, it's a step in that process. And like, we're all gonna have different opinions on like what looks better, like, I got no problem with swoopy, I mean, but do I think, would I pick a swoopy? No, I wouldn't pick a swoopy, right? I actually had a brainstorm, and I'm not an artistic person at all, but I'm like, I got an idea, I'm like, stay out of it,
I've had several ideas.
Yeah, and so I guess what I'd say is, for me, we've been presented with something that I think is a refresh. As importantly as whether we like it or don't like it, the fact that it's going to be consistent, it's going to be something we roll out in all of our communications, something that we're going to start using with our athletic teams, with everything, is over time going to be an improvement. And I think once we get past this part, sort of the real work starts, right? And the real creativity can come in. And I think we ought to just go ahead and vote on this, accept it.
Because it means to an end.
It's a stopgap,
yeah.
right? I mean,
And do we feel like
That's the wrong way to present it, means to an end.
the
yeah.
A only, because I like the A. I actually love how flat the top is on this A versus a one with a point. And I don't have a problem with how fat it looks. It looks chunky and cute. But what about doing just the A and not swoopy?
I think, well,
No.
that's a rebrand. Yeah, I
Okay.
think that's more of a rebrand.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the larger conversation that we're
Okay.
talking about. If we want to start brainstorming about what the clocker could look like on its own or with the A, that's where I think we would want the community input, and that would be much longer process. We're not drastically changing what we have now. We're just cleaning it up.
Okay.
And that's why we're recommending this measure right now. And again, with that being said, we can discuss, if approved, the procedure and the policies that would be in place at the district level for when there are uniforms ordered or anything else, and that it has to be approved or it has to use this. Because I think that's part of part of why we are where we are, because there hasn't been those systems in place to stop people from creating their own, right? Or giving them access to a logo that works for their purpose. So,
Can I ask you a dumb question about color? So, I
Especially
disagree
about
with
color,
that.
apparently.
There absolutely are dumb
As
questions. I'm not
someone
saying
who
this is
goes to
one
high
of
school,
them,
there are
but
dumb
there
questions.
absolutely are. I asked
Why
about
this
them.
blue? Like, I know we are blue. But if you were to ask me, like, what shade of blue we are, I wouldn't have said this one. Do you know, what was his chosen?
Royal.
Reflex 17, something like that.
Is that the one that we standardized in September? I apologize if
No,
I missed
there's-
that.
There is some.
It's
I asked
essentially
him this
royal.
question years ago.
So-
Like, do we have a Ashland blue? He goes, yeah, it's reflex, whatever it was.
right. I think what is happening is that this is the blue from the color, the brand guide that we rolled out, and that's the one that you've seen. I think it looks different because it's the same blue that's in the original one, but there's so much black and so many colors ongoing that it's just looking different. We can revisit and make sure that it is the right shade, but
I agree, it should be more royal.
Yeah, it feels
Yeah.
too
But,
light.
but at some point, normally, when we do logos, I don't even show them in color. Because you need to look at them in black and white first to see if you like the design, right? Because color, but I would agree that this color needs some adjustment. Colors also look different.
Yeah.
Digital,
Yeah.
print, Pantone.
Up
One
there
of the
looks different than I'm
Yeah, it
here.
does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah,
things
like
we'll
it looks
be
really
establishing
better on
in-
yours.
I'm sorry, I'm not, just so, thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
we will be working on,
It better be the same color as our canopy.
Absolutely.
Because
won't
we
be.
have your clocker blue all over Mendez, and it better be
right.
It better
The
be right.
Clocker blue that we've been
I'm not changing
using
that.
is it looks like a much darker, but I know when, again, it looks different because of the codes used when we print or on web, right?
Well,
There's-
looking at the printouts even that Jim has of these slides, it looks different than it does on the
Right.
screen.
Different even
Yeah,
from here to there.
yeah.
Right, because there's different codes that are used for web and for print, and so
Yeah.
you can, like, even when I'm looking at it right now, it looks darker there. But the color that we've identified that's been using in the Mendez School Building Project, or you see on a lot of the materials that we've had since I've been in this position, it is much darker blue. We can reassess that and make sure that we can come up with the correct code that will look, but again, it will look different because there's not as much black. It's been modernized, so it just may look different on your screen, whether print and things like that.
So I think we've beaten Swoopy to a pulp.
Yeah.
And so maybe now there's a motion somewhere in
Well,
the
do we need to
discussion.
vote on this?
Can I
Or,
beat
I mean-
Swoopy to a pulp slightly more? Can I ask, is there any opportunity for like slightly more revision? Like I know that we want to get this stopgap in place as soon as possible, right? But like you said, this is going to be a process that takes a while to get to if we want to do a full rebrand, and if that ends up happening, that's not going to be something that takes 3 days, because that would be irresponsible and we would hate the rebrand 3 days after that. But is there any opportunity for slight adjustments to be made to these logos? Because I will say, I don't totally hate these logos. I think that they're actually really good. But is there any opportunity to like make small tweaks, like they make the clock smaller so it doesn't like look disproportionate? I don't know if that's something that I want to do, but that's just an idea that I had. Is there any opportunity for that to like, and bring it up next meeting and then do that kind of thing? Or is this like the final thing where like we either approve it or we don't?
That is the discretion of the
I think we can do whatever we want,
Right.
and I'm not, look, 2 weeks more of what we've got going on isn't the end of the world, but I think at some point, we also have to trust the professional people who spent a lot of time working on it, probably done 100 iterations of this to come up with this, and we saw 3 variations, and I agree with 3, by the way. And I think it's at some point, you just got to say, you know what, you can't let better be the enemy of perfect, and
Yeah.
move.
The only thing is when you
Yeah.
zoom
I was trying to paraphrase.
I knew what you meant.
Is that what I said?
8 people sitting around the
Thank you.
table here,
With different
and
minutes.
I would have a little tweak, you would have a different little tweak,
Right,
and
yeah.
then she'd combine them, and we'd all hate it.
Yeah.
And so,
The only thing is when you zoom in, the bottom of the swoop on the lower left ligature of the A, there is a tiny spot of outline that would be difficult for embroidery and screen printing. And so I don't know if that's something we can slightly move swoopy down just a tiny bit so that we lose that. And that also, that we get a little bit more of the horizontal.
All right.
Tiny.
Is there a motion?
Yes.
And what is it?
I approve it as,
How about in concept?
yes.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion?
I don't even know what that was.
It's all right. It may just be one of those things we have to go with. Bob.
Yeah, so there is, and I noticed that if it was up a little bit or down a little bit, it kind of makes an odd transition there, but I wasn't gonna go. So I would make a motion to approve these 2 Ashland A logos as presented with the professionals' minor tweaks to make any adjustments. How's that?
So Aaron, do you accept that as a alternative wording?
Yes.
Okay. And so Aaron, do you second that?
I second
All
that.
right. Any further discussion?
I just have one question in terms of, because I know people are going to
He's
want to
dead
know
already.
this.
Like, yeah. Okay.
I'm fine moving forward with this now because we need to. and I get this is a stopgap, but I know people are going to be asking, well, when is the conversation going to happen about a rebrand, right? Like, is that something that we as a committee need to figure out, kind of timeline, if we need a budget for it, if we, like, is that, how much of a conversation is that for us to have versus Esmer moving forward with starting that? I don't know, and so just thinking through timing, we may not have an answer to that yet, but I know that question is going to be asked.
I would suggest that that's something that can be discussed at the retreat, maybe part of the strategic plan talks and just long-term goals. A complete rebrand would be costly. We don't have a tagline. We don't have, we don't have different formats, like an actual color palette, like a brand's voice. There's a lot of things that go in with it, like an actual letterhead. That would be a larger conversation. And again, if we have the input, if we want the community input, there would be focus groups, research, surveys.
So probably not
feedback.
something we start till next fall.
It would be something much longer.
Yeah, I would agree that the retreat's a good place because I think we need to also set the scope of it.
Yes.
Because what you said, I'm like, no, that's not part of the conversation of, are we even the clockers? I don't
think that was part
I
of the
mean, to
conversation.
me, that was never part of it, but it's like, but we haven't figured out what it means to be a clocker from a brand perspective.
You might be surprised that it is a conversation in the community.
I brought this up in October and got shot
So
down.
I'm going to call for the vote.
I'm going to say you'd probably be surprised in your little sphere of athletics as well. Athletics is a very loud but very small portion of our community.
So calling for the vote. Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori? Lori? She said aye. Okay. And aye for me as well. Southern, all right. Thank you. That was a
Thank you.
robust and swishy talk. All right.
Swoopy.
Thanks, guys, for all your work.
Thank you.
Seriously, all kidding aside, we know you put a lot of work into that, and
Aren't you glad you came?
I am.
all right.
And it is good to know that it's just my little group that I'm hearing, because I love the caucus. Like, so that's
too.
great.
Marketing branding, it really sets us apart.
All right. Next item on the agenda, policy IKF, graduation requirements, community service. So we've obviously had some discussion. We had public comment earlier. I think we've all received a few emails from community members, and I want to acknowledge that those, I know personally I've read all the ones that have been forwarded, so thank you to folks at home who have sent in their thoughts. And so I think from where we left it off before, Ms. St. Kerr kind of talked with us a bit about the challenges to the graduation requirement of 25 hours of community service. There's also a tie-in in our policy to senior privileges. And so I think what we decided to do is make sure we gave the community an opportunity for input. Can I thank you? And then we would take up the issue here and try to make a decision on which way we wanted to go. Thought maybe, I don't know if Kelly has anything she wants to share on the topic, but.
Well, just to clarify,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's where we left off. We left
Okay.
off having made a decision, wanting to take a vote, but Jim and I said that we didn't think we had it on the agenda properly, so.
I disagree. I wasn't ready to vote on it last week, but I thought we needed to,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, either way, we're gonna have a conversation, we're gonna have a vote.
It's in the video that there was gonna come up for a vote and we said no. Right, so it's not
Right,
a
we
debate.
weren't- yeah.
I'm not saying how you would have voted
Yeah.
or anything
No,
like
no,
that.
no, I wasn't ready. That's what I was just saying. I wasn't ready to vote last week. I misunderstood what you were saying.
All right, so let's just, obviously, one way or another, we're gonna have a little bit of conversation,
Yeah.
motion, and we'll see if we have a vote and how that goes. Before we get to that, just want to come back to Ms. St. Kerr and see if there's anything that she wants to add, because obviously this is a predominantly a high school issue, district-wide issue, but, so Kelly, anything that you wanted to add or reflect on, what have you?
I don't have anything really to add. I think I would just reiterate that we of course continue to believe in the value of community service at the high school, but feel strongly about looking at it a different way and carrying out a different way. And I do agree that is it's a hard thing to put on students to say that they would not be able to graduate if they could not meet the requirement as it is currently written.
You faded
I'm
out
here
there, Kelly.
If you have any questions, say it again.
You faded out there for a moment, but you're all right now.
Okay, sorry. No, so I'm just here to answer any
Okay.
questions if you have any.
Thank you. So why don't we, I mean, I don't know if people want to start with different thoughts that they've had since we were here last, or if somebody just wants to put a motion on the table, and we can debate off of that. So, comments?
No, never mind, because I know you have edits, so I won't.
What's that?
Well, no, all right, I move to remove the 25-hour community service requirement. So
Okay.
then discussion, or.
Well, but we're talking about, so.
There's a policy
There's
also.
a policy, and
Yeah.
and Jim
The way it's written
circulated,
here,
Okay.
circulated a potential.
So, yeah, maybe I can frame that. So one of the things that we've received since we were together is a draft policy amendment that includes, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but includes removal of the 25-hour requirement. Thank you, Jim. Includes removal of the reference to it being a part of senior privileges, and then it adds a policy statement. The other page you've given me. Okay. Adds a policy statement about the importance of community service. So that's what's been presented to us as a draft policy change. I don't know if I omitted anything. There's
The
one
only
other thing in there
that
about
was-
6.5 credits
Yeah,
per
yeah,
year.
That was the only other thing.
Yeah, which I assume is largely more of a technical issue. But
It
not,
it just has nothing to do with graduation.
right, right. So, so Paul, is this something you worked up on through the policy subcommittee, or is it?
It wasn't through the policy, but I went back and forth
Okay.
with Jim a little bit, and so he tweaked a few things. But honestly, when I went back and looked at the policy, I read the policy, and I literally texted Jim like, this does not say that community service is part of graduation at all. The statement that was in there said, community service requirement of 25 hours must be completed by the end of the student's junior year in order to obtain senior privileges. And like, it's an odd place to have senior privileges mentioned.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
it doesn't say that it's a requirement for graduation, it says it's a requirement for senior privileges.
Well, I think it can be read as a requirement for graduation, though, because this is the policy on graduation requirements, and
Right.
they're laid out in bullet points. And this is the last bullet point, community service. I read it as that kind of the second part of the sentence that, can I see that, Mark? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me. The language around, must be completed by the end of student's junior year in order to obtain senior privileges was like an add-on to what that requirement of 25 hours. So,
Yeah, I think functionally, we've treated it that way.
Right,
So,
exactly.
Right, so,
so-
and like I said, I don't want to debate that, because that's one of the reasons. The other thing is struck in it because it has nothing to do with,
Right.
has nothing to do with graduation, the 6.5 for previous years, right? It has nothing to do with it, but, I kind of tweaked a few things with Jim on this. And so, yeah, I support the draft that he put forward.
Okay.
He also just did a couple other minor word
Yeah.
tweaks, but.
So Aaron, you started to make a motion, and so if I'm understanding it, is it the motion to amend, or to accept the amendment to policy IKF, graduation requirements as presented?
Yes,
Okay.
apparently I can't make a motion correctly tonight, I'm sorry.
Yeah. You never, that time you got interrupted, so is there a
I just have
second?
some kind of general
Oh, hold
comment.
on. Is there a second first?
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, now we go. Good.
So, kind of in looking at this, I, like Mark, like I'm sure all of us, heard from a lot of community members about this. I heard from a lot of parents directly. I was stopped by 2 parents in the grocery store on Sunday. This is definitely something people obviously have, strong opinions about. And so in looking at what our requirement was and going back to who are we as a district and why is community service important to us, where does it fit in to how we've chosen to put forth our vision and whatnot. Our vision states that, we are helping students embrace their roles as positive contributors to their local and global communities. So this is something, in my view, that we have decided we will help foster the development of that in our students. It's part of our vision for our students. And so, but it's clear that this current system and where we have community service in our policies is specifically in this graduation requirement. And for all of the reasons Kelly articulated, for the reasons we've heard from many community members, there are a lot of barriers to this. It's a very cumbersome process. And there's a big question as to whether or not this specific requirement, how it's worded and how it works, is actually creating that intrinsic desire in students to become you know, those positive contributors to their local community. So is this a meaningful way to include this in the education of our students? You know, I'm 100% on board with changing how we approach this. I think, you know, part of the community service statement that's been put forth in this motion is around, you know, having, hold on, let me look at the language, you know, like creating so that all buildings will, where I'm looking at the wrong language. You know, that all buildings will have, sorry, thank you, I don't have the full thing in front of me. You know, that the community service statement reiterates our mission and then talks about the fact that, you know, we believe that when students engage in community service opportunities starting at the youngest levels, they're more likely to develop a lifelong commitment to civic responsibility and community. I would 100% agree with that. I really like where that's going. And then it goes on to state, therefore, each school building will be responsible for providing service opportunities annually for students. So there's a lot about this that I like, but I have a few thoughts, a few concerns. So, you know, kind of I love the idea of expanding community service straight down in all of our buildings and helping all of our students cultivate the understanding of what it means to be a community member, what it means to serve your community. You know, it also takes the responsibility off of just the high school and that specific graduation requirement to help instill that in our students. But I feel like the wording of this, I think this is an amazing opportunity for some exciting change in terms of how we help our students connect with community service district-wide. But I feel like it's a little bit too vague. And in order to create a new district-wide requirement or program or whatnot, we need a lot more discussion about what it looks like, what type of resources each building might need to help make this a reality, how the buildings might coordinate with each other, making sure everybody is on the same page about what this means. Because if we're gonna make this change to take it out of just a high school graduation requirement and make it something that we're really including in all of our schools, I think it needs to be a much more thoughtful process than just this change in our policy. And so, you know, I think that there are things that we can improve on this idea, and these are my thoughts. You know, kind of looking at implementing really a district-wide service learning model. And so like service learning is really, you know, kind of incorporating and connecting, you know, our academic curriculum with the community, connecting, you know, potential service opportunities, just exposure to being a part of the community with learning on all levels. It can be done through classes, through service projects, through, you know, I'm just thinking, I know my own, my now junior in high school, when he was in kindergarten or first grade, they were learning about farms, and they took a field trip to the Natick Community Organic Farm, and they were farmers for the day. Like, that's an incredible service learning opportunity or community learning opportunity to learn how to be members of their community and learn. So things like that, right? I think that there's a big opportunity to really kind of reinvent how we help students become these positive contributors and understand their communities. And so looking at, can we and how do we create more of a service learning model kind of straight across the board? But I think in order to make this something that is district-wide, if we're having all of our buildings, you know, kind of create and provide these opportunities, we need input from everybody. We need to have a collective conversation about what this looks like and what it means. And so I think it's going to require a little bit more work than just this policy, because there are also things that we'll have to figure out, like resources, infrastructure, and all that type of stuff. Can we, you know, how do we involve the community? You know, I think that there's a lot of amazing groups to partner with to bring into this conversation and how we can involve the community. And at the, you know, the Ashland Public Library, the Town Hall, the Senior Center, there are lots of different, you know, organizations just even within the town government or connected to the town that I think would love to partner and try and create some of these opportunities. You know, thinking through, you know, Esmer in her role of, you know, kind of creating some of these community connections. I think there's a real opportunity to use some of that to help foster this, and even thinking about how we, you know, infuse some of this into the SEL work that we're already doing with all of our kids, and what does it mean to be a community member? Like, I think there's a lot that's already happening that we can put a tiny lens about being a community member on some of that. And so I think that it's a bigger conversation. Because I think we have a real opportunity to do something really exciting when it comes to community service if we really want to make kind of our vision or reality in terms of helping students and really cultivating their ability to be these contributors to society. And so, and then the other thing in terms of, I understand why the current system isn't working. I understand that the graduation requirement is difficult for many students to meet for equity issues. There's a lot of administrative challenges, and then there's a big meaningfulness question for some students. But it is working for another segment of our students. And so kind of thinking through, how do we make a thoughtful transition from one system to the next? We can't just get rid of it when we have, I feel like it's hard to just get rid of it when we have a lot of kids who have worked hard to meet it. And so how are we going to still acknowledge the efforts that they've made to meet this requirement? And I think there are a lot of different ways we can approach it. But I feel like this is a much bigger conversation. So, my thoughts in terms of, next steps would be, looking at, creating that bigger process. Is it potentially a working group to talk through what this might look like? I don't know. I don't want to say the school committee subcommittee, but I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but I feel like it needs to be a much bigger conversation. And so, my thought is, if we, reduce the community service graduation requirement or waive it for, a couple of years as we're figuring out what comes next, but still have some incentive involved, because there are a lot of kids who have worked to meet this community service requirement who will still be in the high school, and I think that effort should be acknowledged as well. So that's kind of where I stand on the whole thing.
Okay. Well, let's see if Lori wants to chime in since. Lori, any?
No,
We can't hear you, Lori.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I shared my thoughts the last time, and not too much of that has changed, but I have been watching some of the comments, and we did get some letters from, some parents who don't want to see the requirement go away, but we've also heard from people that are in support of it, as well as a teacher who wrote to us in support of it. I still remain in support of it for all the reasons that I already shared. And Tina, I share one of the things that was kind of concerning to me about some of the comments that I was seeing out on social media and other places. This is not the Ashland School Committee or the Ashland School District saying that we no longer value community service and that we no longer think it's important. We very much think it's important. And I think ironically, Tina, like even some of, and I hear where you're going with that, and certainly my kids put their time in and they did their thing, but in some ways it's like ironic, because the point of community service is community service, and it's not to get credit, I don't think, for everything that they did, and it's to open them up to the experience of helping another person. And I think that is kind of the point of what we're saying here, that we have attached this reward. You get to graduate if you do X as far as community service goes, and the problems that we're having with that haven't just appeared this year, and I don't think there's a perfect time. And again, what you were saying about, Tina, doing it now is going to be problematic for people who had put their time in. There's never going to be a perfect time to do this, and it's also not a new I sat on the high school site council for many years, and it was always something that we were trying to figure out because it was problematic. And nobody wanted to do away with community service, and nobody still, I think everybody's on the same page about wanting to let the community know that we still value it, and that I still feel very strongly about finding a way to make sure that I think it's more provide opportunities than it is, incorporate it in a way that people are going to get credit and they're going to get punished if they don't. I think that's where I have a problem with the whole system. But I absolutely think it is important that we do everything we can to provide opportunities. And I do agree that that's a bigger conversation. And I do agree that it's going to take some time. But I don't think it needs to be connected in any way to this decision of removing something that has become an obstacle, I think. And it's problematic for the staff. It's not applied consistently across the board. my kids are adults now, and I can tell you, and again, I chaperone a service project every year, and it's the best thing that I do, and I love every minute of it, and I'm so happy that the kids get credit for it, but to me, that's besides the point. And my kids, the things that they're doing now as adults, with all due respect, they're not doing them because they were forced to do 25 hours before they graduated. So I think it's two separate conversations, and one is absolutely yes. I think we still need to have an ongoing conversation about making sure everybody knows that we value this and that we're going to, I think every student needs to be exposed to what it feels like to help another person or an organization. And I think we should put the time in to make that happen, but I don't think it needs to be connected any longer to any kind of reward or punishment.
Thanks, Laurie. So
Yeah.
I guess I'll chime in, and I think everybody else have spent a lot of time thinking about it. I think the comments from the community have been helpful. I think that the core of this, it's a part of our current vision statement, and presumably will be some part of our final vision statement that we're working on now, our mission statement, to have a value associated with community service. And I agree completely with, I think, Laurie, but I think everybody else is sharing the same thing. We all think that's really important and something to be emphasized. The question is, is this model of supporting that really being effective at its goal, right? Are we doing our students justice by introducing the importance of community service to them in the process that we have in place right now? And I think the answer to that is largely now. And I think putting it as a graduation requirement in theory feels like a good thing, because it's a way of saying how important it is. As a practical matter, it feels like it's become, for a lot of students, I have to check that box, I have to do something, and in some ways it devalues the experience to something that they're doing because they have to. And so like everybody else, I think I'm certainly in support of removing the graduation requirement. I think a couple other thoughts that I'd like to share. One is that, to the extent we're talking about a graduation policy, and I would say from the outset, I think, Paul, you made the comment as well, that even talking about senior privileges in a graduation policy, that senior privileges shouldn't be a school committee issue. That's a high school administration thing, right? Yeah, it's a different place for that. That's part of it. I think the other thing that, as I look at, and I honestly hadn't really thought about this until listening to your comments, Tina, but thinking through the statement at the end, the sort of policy vision statement about community service or value statement, I don't know if that belongs in there either, to be honest with you, because it's not a graduation requirement. It's part of our vision statement, right? It's a part of something that I think gets rolled out as we finish our strategic plan, and that's something that is a value that is district-wide rather than sort of graduation. So I think the statement's great. I just don't know where it goes, and I don't know that it goes here. I think the other piece is that our job as school committee members is largely to try to set policy direction, goals, and clearly we're all in alignment that community service needs to remain a significant part of what we're doing, and we need to do it better. But I also think that the exact implementation and the exercise and how to make that work better largely is an administratively led thing. How it's going to work at Mendez is something that is Jenna's responsibility, and working with the team. And I think there ought to be a lot of coordination around that. I think there is a place for community involvement. I don't think there's anything that precludes any of us as school committee members from being a part of that. But I don't know that getting into sort of how we're going to make that happen is a discussion that happens here. I think what we're saying is, like everything else we do, it's a policy. This is what we support. These are the values of the school district. And then we go, now you go figure it out, and so I think moving away from the graduation requirement is certainly something I support. Making sure that this remains front and center as an issue for the district, I think, is important. It strikes me as something that if we now have this conversation and finish our work on the strategic plan, we should all be looking and say, let's make sure we capture that in there somewhere. But it becomes a part of what we do next and how we do it through all our buildings. that I think is sort of where we're going to figure out whether we're successful, just like how we do with math instruction or anything else. So those are my opinions. Anybody else? I mean, Paul, Aaron, you didn't really have a chance to articulate your thoughts beyond the initial motion, but
I talked enough about Swoopy.
he's talking about Swoopy.
So, I'm good. I agree with one thing that you said. It was the paragraph
Just
at
one,
the
though, right?
end. No, I pretty much agree with the whole thing. The paragraph at the end talking about the value, it doesn't belong in the policy. For me, I say get rid of it all, and I'm okay. And part of it is the implicit trust that I have with this group, and the other part is the fact that we are going through strategic plan right now. Is that I am comfortable taking it completely out of the graduation requirement document, knowing that it is not going to disappear from our values and the work we going forward. Tina, what you said and your vision is awesome. I love the curricular and cross buildings approach to community service. I love it. And I just don't think it needs to be in this document for us to achieve like that future state that I think you have a beautiful vision for.
And see, my thought on that is, right now, as a committee, we have decided that the way, this probably was not put in place by anybody that's sitting at this table, right? I think this has been there for a little while, but the school committee.
I was going to say,
when I get a chance to speak, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
He's the one that increased it, though.
Mm-hmm. And so, like, the district-wide policy that is part of our responsibility, the way in which we have incorporated our value of community service in our policies is through the graduation requirement. I'm not comfortable removing all mention of community service and giving some direction of what we think that means to the district. I trust them to run with it, but I think it is our job to have somewhere in our policies a statement of what community service means. If we're removing what we think community service, what it has been, we need a new statement of what it will be. And without that, I'm not comfortable removing it.
And so what's your, what approach do you have? So, I mean, I don't know if you're
Yeah.
talking about the specific things.
Yeah,
at
and
the
so, I
end,
mean,
or-
it would make me a lot more comfortable, like, looking at that community service statement. I love what it means. I really do. I love what it means, but I think it needs a little bit more specificity in terms of, kind of, I do think we need to go beyond just making opportunities available. I think seeing kind of that's, the model in essence that students now have to search out and find, opportunities that are available. The high school certainly shares ones, that they're aware of, but I think it leaves it there, but it doesn't, I don't feel like it fulfills our vision of cultivating students who are, those, positive contributors. I think we need to foster that a little bit more. We have, in my mind, our vision means that we have taken that on as part of what we're doing for our students. And so I think if it moves, particularly at the high school, and I know Kelly had mentioned this, the idea of having, service days so that each class each year would have a day where they perform service. Like, I think rather than just say, here are the 5 opportunities, go do something, there are so many different ways that it could happen, but to have those opportunities, one day a year in school for each class. Obviously, it's going to look very different in the middle school. It's going to look very different in the elementary level too. But, my thought is, in terms of keeping that community service statement in this policy for now, because I feel like we need something, and, kind of tweaking it at the end, to state that we will be, providing age-appropriate, service learning opportunities or community service events annually during school hours. And then, either stating when the requirement will go into effect so that we know what the planning time is and, when, so that the buildings also have some feedback in terms of when they need to be ready to implement that. I just feel like if we're asking all of the buildings to now do this, they need some planning time. We need to understand what they need to make it happen. I think that it's a much bigger conversation. And I would love to see it go in that direction. I'm perfectly happy if that's the direction it goes. But I'm not comfortable getting rid of our statement, our district policy statement around community service, which right now is that graduation requirement, without having something else about how we're going to now implement that.
It almost sounds like what you're looking for is like a new policy, which we couldn't really do here on the fly tonight, right? I mean, we're talking about the graduation policy.
No, so if I could just jump in. So I don't want to go over everything we talked about last time, but to kind of address maybe something you said that I kind of disagree with a little bit, in that it's not our place to, but we are community representation, right? We were elected by the community. We are the community members. So I agree that when it comes to curricular things, we might set a policy, but how it gets implemented, 100% on them, not our business. We're not the educational professionals. When we talk about something that is now, how do we do community service and engage our community? Well, that is us. That is, we are elected by the community. We are the community's voice into the district. So I think it absolutely falls in our court to be a key role in that. But also, obviously, that we rely on them for their input, because at the end of the day, they're the sharp end of the spear. They're going to be the ones doing the work and facilitating that. So I believe that. And this is going to go against most of the time what I say when we're in our policy subcommittee meetings. But I agree with your statement that that statement doesn't belong in this policy. But I also agree that it needs to be there for now. Because I would be the first person in our policy subcommittee meeting saying, this needs to go, right? But we don't have that thing. And so what I had mentioned last time was, we've said system, we've said processes and stuff like that. Those words don't exist. Somebody threw a poorly worded bullet in a policy, and that's all that was done. And, Kelly and everyone else was left to figure out what that means. It's not defined what it means. The idea of, I asked Kelly last time about the clubs and what qualifies for community service, and it was kind of and that the ambiguity has got to go, right? We need to know, what is the goal of it, right? And what are the definitions of these things? How do we set it up and know that we're successful? And what I said last time is, I'm good getting rid of it only if it goes into our strategic plan. And so I think keeping this the statement, and I'll give you feedback, because the issue I had with the statement was the last sentence, because I don't want to put in a policy that isn't going to be followed. And the last statement says that our buildings are going to do something. And I had that conversation with Jim, and I'll let him, elaborate if he wants to, but he says, nope, that he wants his building administrators to start doing their own things until we come up with something down the line. So I'm good keeping it there. And that's counterintuitive to what I would normally say in a policy. I would want to get rid of anything that doesn't relate to this policy, but we need something new. And I think, to your point, Tina, and that's why I said last time, it's got to be something broader that is defined. And I think that's a longer process that needs to be part of our strategic planning.
So if I can I want to clarify my comment. I think what I was really trying to get at is, I think you can have a policy that supports wherever we're going in the future. It's a matter of the level of detail. Like I don't, if it's going to be a policy that says there shall be within schools at least one community service day or something like that, I personally, I get even a little nervous at that level, because what if Pete wants to do 2 half days, right? And I don't want to try to hash all that out now. Right. Just using an illustration, because my opinion on sort of where our role is I agree with you that in terms of sort of community engagement and sort of the framework of that and what we support and how we do it, yes, that's a part of our role. When it gets into sort of how our programs work at a building-based level, I don't think that's us. Right. And so if I was unclear on that, I just want to clarify that. If you still disagree with me, that's fine too. I think we can do that.
So for me, it's a little bit grayer, because we're talking about them interacting with the community, and so while we're not the people that are effectuating that, we should be part of the conversation of a little deeper than we normally would be, to understand that it's having the effect that, and meeting our things. It's, like I said last time, the thing is, it's in our current mission statement. It's going to be our vision statement. It's in our next one, right? it's clearly something we value. We just need to determine how we value it.
Yeah.
And throwing a bullet into this, the way it was done, is, as I said before, analogous to an unfunded mandate in my book. So.
I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to pipe in again, you guys, because you know where I stand on removing the requirement, but I also feel strongly about not adding anything else yet. It's too vague. We don't know where we're headed. I don't think we have to say, and I still have these guys buzzing in my ear. Jim, you remember that, the year long that I spent, this was many years ago now, with the MASC and the policy people, telling me what belongs in policy and what doesn't belong in policy, and a vague statement about, we value it or we expect everybody to do. I mean, we don't have a fully enough defined plan yet. I think we're into a process conversation, and a vague sentence or two in a policy is not the place until we've hashed it out in our strategic plan. And then maybe having Jim give the mission back to the site councils to come up with plans for what would look good in their building, and have it go through that process, and they can come back and present to us. And if at some point it seems like we have to put something in policy because we then want something to be a requirement, that would be appropriate for policy. But I don't think a vague a statement is appropriate in a policy manual. So I know we now have 3 or 4 different opinions on what should remain, if anything, but I feel pretty strongly that it's not even appropriate here.
So Jim, you've been trying to, well, you've been biting your tongue at least, so please.
So let me be clear. I don't disagree with Paul in the sense that the community service statement doesn't really belong in policy. I knew that. I knew how he would react when I wrote it, which was okay. But I needed to capture the sentiment of the board and of the schools and the principals and the administration and what we believe in. And so, but there was no other place to put this, right? It's not, if we keep it within this policy itself, then we are in essence, and it goes back to the comment of, while it may be a statement versus the bullet of the graduation requirement being 25 hours, we're saying, in essence, to a certain degree, it is part of the graduation requirement. And I don't feel comfortable with that. I put it here because I didn't want to lose the conversation of this. I easily could have left this component out. I agree with you, Tina, 1,000% with regard to how we need to approach community service with community service learning and a variety of other options that are at our disposal. That being said, I think that comes under another umbrella, not the umbrella of the graduation requirement. And again, my thought of putting it here was I didn't want to lose that conversation. So I wanted you to say, okay, I agree with this, I like the statement, but we can expand upon it. You're right. But I think it's part of the strategic plan. I think it's part of our strategic actions. I think that's where we need to go with this. Do I believe that annually each of our grade levels throughout the district can perform some sort of community service? I do. I don't know what that looks like at the kindergarten level. Mm-hmm. I don't know what Pete would have his kids. Is it bringing them together and, hey, let's walk around the Warren campus and clean up the debris that's there? That's, again, it's starting a conversation of what it means to give back to your community, mm-hmm. helping out cleaning in the lunchroom, mm-hmm. Doing those little things, even at the smallest of levels, grade levels, or youngest of grade levels, starts to embed that service is really important. And that's my vision for it, as opposed to pre-COVID, Kelly, when we had community service days for all seniors, during senior week, it went away. And it went away for lots of reasons, but COVID drove that in that March of 20. But that used to be one of my favorite days, where kids would go work at the community center. They would work for DPW. They would clean up the softball fields. They would do numerous projects, and they would sign up, and teachers would go with them and track it, and it was great stuff. But as part of the graduation requirement, again, I'll reiterate, I don't think it belongs there. I put it there on purpose so we could have a conversation. I will be the one, and I called Kelly immediately after the last meeting and said, you know who you can blame for this entire mess, right? Well, it was Jim Adams 13 years ago, 13 years ago, when he's the one who advocated for 25 hours of community service to be part of the graduation requirement when he was the high school principal. I'm to blame. But I also look at it and say, back then, what did we foresee in terms of what was happening within our district, how our district has changed from a demographic standpoint, from a, just a socioeconomic standpoint, the opportunities that exist and the inequities that could potentially exist for our students, and that do in reality exist for some of our students. And I know I don't want to get into, let's waive, Kelly's got to have an appeal process for 5 kids each year. I don't want to get into that. I think it's unfair to Kelly. It's unfair to the folks who are coordinating community service. And I want to go back to one of the initial comments. I think it was Joan who made the integrity of what we're doing. Right, the integrity of community service is critically important. It's a core value at Ashland High School. Integrity. I'm telling you right now, there's a certain segment of the population that may be getting 4 hours of credit for doing 1 hour of work. Is that, a legitimate? Now they're saying, I went and got my community service here, signed off on, it's fine. Now I'm halfway, or a quarter of the way there, whatever it is. 1/6 of the way, I guess, to my requirement. But I really didn't. I'm really 1/25 of the way there. To me, I didn't want to lose that component, that we value it. We believe in it. It is part of our vision. It will continue to be part of our vision. How we get there is a much larger discussion, but it's not part of the graduation requirement, in my opinion. So.
Jim, the way I'm thinking about this is very much like SEL, right? We don't necessarily have SEL policies, and there's no DESE requirement for SEL, but it's a value that we all, building administrators and the committee, have put in, and we've put in all the structures to make that part of the fabric of our community. And so without policy, we are able to execute on our vision. And I can appreciate you didn't want to lose visibility to it, but you guys don't have anything written about SEL policy, and still you're executing wonderfully on that. And so that's where my thought is, of that we don't necessarily need it. In this document, I'm in full agreement with Lori. It's out of place. It doesn't make sense. And I know in any other circumstance, you would have red X'd it as well. So I think we can go forward without the policy. I know that it's hard to think about not putting any stopgap, but I think the stopgap is who we are as people and the values.
Well, I think that's the reason I support it, for 2 things. I see it is kind of, we talk about vision of a graduate. A vision of a graduate is we've done this, right? It's not a graduation requirement, and so I get that that's what the policy is, right? Yeah. But so for those 2 reasons, I support it in there, knowing that once we partake in what we want to do, we remove it, or this goes into every handbook, right, or something like that. But we've heard clearly that the community values it, and they thought we didn't, but obviously they didn't. We're not at our last meeting, and I think this statement is something that shows that it matters to us, because we do policy. So we do policy, and so having this, where I would agree that permanently it doesn't belong there, temporarily I kind of think it does, because we're removing this thing. And I think that the vague statement, and we have plenty of vague statements in policy, and policies to some extent should be vague enough for the administrations to, we have lots of things that say that, that the superintendent or designee will promulgate procedures and whatever, because we've just made some vague statement. We have no idea how it's going to happen, right? So that's the stopgap, is saying that we value it, And we expect it to continue, to not only continue, but to have organic things happening in our schools. Having that in there, and like I said, to me, I thought it was too strong, because I'm like, it's saying that they will. And Jim was like, well, no, I want them to. And I think that is going to help inform whatever process we undertake, because it's not going to be, we say this, and then Pete and Kate and Jenna and Todd are going to, in the lower grades, then start thinking about it. They're going to start thinking about it now, and they're going to come to the table with things that they've tried, things that work, and that's going to inform what we think about and how we define what community service means in those conversations. Because right now it's strictly a graduation, aka high school lens, and that's clearly different than what our overall vision is, what this statement is, and what Jim is. So I'm in support of keeping it, because it is that we're removing this. It matters to us, it matters to the community, and it's that pin that keeps it in there that we have to go back and address. And that like I said, and Jim said, I would normally
Hey,
say
Mark,
that's
oh, excuse me, Paul, are you still?
You all set, Paul?
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
No, my question was, I don't remember the wording of the original motion. I think we made a motion before we went into discussion. Do you want to, should we break it into two votes? One is whether we should remove the requirement.
I was going to get
and
there,
then-
Lori. I just want to make sure people had
Sure.
So I guess the one thing I'll just throw out there in terms of that, that last statement about the policy statement is, are people, I guess, I'm referring from the conversation, but I just want to pose it. Our vision statement, talks about those who embrace the role as responsible contributors to a global community, right? And I understand it's a vision statement, it's broader, it's a little bit different than a policy of sort of how are we going to get there. But I think it's important to remember that that statement's already there, and yes, it's a little bit different than community service, but I think it certainly is related, and that's why we're having this conversation, because that's what we're aiming for. The other thing that I guess I think about is there's nothing that stops us from taking a vote as a statement, just separate and apart from a policy, a motion from any of us that says, that I move that we require, and you fill in the blanks with whatever you want, that each school building has a problem, right? And it's different than a policy statement. I get it's not in writing and it doesn't have its home, but that is also still an affirmative declaration of the view of the school committee. I don't know if that approach would be satisfactory to, I'm kind of looking at you and Tina, because you guys are the ones pushing most for that to come out. So let's let people kind of wrap up their thoughts. I think Lori's right. I think the way to approach this is, let's pull out the policy and sort of look at the component parts just to see where we have agreement. And I understand, Tina, from your comments earlier, at least, you might have a hard time agreeing to the first part without a second part, but we'll sort that out. So why don't we see if there are final comments?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of that, so I feel like, looking at this graduation requirement, I don't know that it's going to still have a graduation requirement that might be amended to meet a new policy. Like, let's say, and I'm just throwing this out there, not saying that this is what needs to happen, but let's say at the high school, if the decision is made that every year, every graduating class will have a day of service, and be it a class project, be it something, whatever it is, so that students have that opportunity in school. I don't see why we can't make it mandatory for them to participate. Obviously, I mean, right? They're going to be in school. It's during the school day, but I also don't want it to become something that like, we can skip. It's just service day, right? Like, depending upon what the new model looks like, it may be completely reasonable to keep it as a graduation requirement. But I don't know, because I don't know what the new model looks like, right? And so, again, I'm uncomfortable completely removing what we have without knowing what it's going to look like, because depending on the reiteration, the reimagination of what it is, we may find a way to address some of the issues that we're dealing with that overcomes some of the equity problems that kids are having being involved in it, that makes it more meaningful to the students. There's always going to be a population of students where this isn't going to be meaningful to them, and that's just how it is. But if we can find a way to involve students more in connecting and, working on that day of service and what it looks like and building it and planning it, I feel like I don't know what it's gonna look like, so I'm not comfortable taking away the requirement. I'm fine amending the requirement, I'm fine reducing it, or potentially, looking at ways to address a stopgap, but it's really hard for me to say I'm not comfortable getting rid of one without knowing what it's gonna look like in the future.
I mean,
But I agree 100% that all of these issues need to be dealt with. I think we're very much on the same page in terms of they all need to be dealt with. I recognize them and appreciate them. I'm struggling with
Yeah,
that piece.
so, two things, just Kelly, maybe you can chime in here that, say we approved this change to the policy and we got rid of the statement in it, right? What I understood from talking with you last time and talking with Jim is that your intention is to try to implement many of those things that you put in that presentation. Is you are not going to wait for us to go through a process to try to do something, and that your intention was to begin to try to do some of these things, like whether it be whatever it was that you're going to actively be trying to pursue ways for community service to occur at the high school. You're not going to just remove this and then sit by and wait for the new directive. Or am I mischaracterizing the intent there?
No, you're correct. Jim mentioned the senior week event. That has happened the last 2 years, but in a very modified version. And we'd like to make that, as much as possible, make it more robust again. And that is part of one of the days the students do right at the end of the year, the entire senior class, and they are required to participate in that event. I think one of the other things I spoke about was knowing that PSATs are going to be moved to during the school day next year for all schools. So, something that other schools do is plan a day where perhaps the entire freshman class is doing something service related that day. Juniors and some sophomores are taking the PSATs, and seniors are having an opportunity to work with that. So that was one thought I had on how we could, at least next year, start to implement something different. We've also had some conversations about, planning some sort of, or incorporating community service fair into some of the fairs that we already do with the students, whether it's our clubs and activities fair at the beginning of the year with freshmen, or finding a way to incorporate some kind of a fair like that into the school day.
Let me just throw this thought out at everybody. I'm looking at the document here and the draft policy, and would folks be satisfied with the idea that we incorporate the changes that are proposed sort of as to the graduation requirements and the edits that are included there, but at the same time just adopt a standalone community service value statement, which would read materially like the bottom? I understand the tweaking that can be improved there, but I don't know that we have other things that constitute value statements or not, but I think that's kind of more or less what we're looking for. Is we want to find a way to say this is still really important, and it may not.
We've done that in the past, Mark, when we did the anti-racist statement a couple years ago. Yeah. I think that would be more appropriate than putting it in policy, because it's not policy. But I would certainly support a statement.
Okay. Yep. So I'm more, to be honest with you, I'm looking more at Paul Tina since
well, I mean, to be honest with you, I just feel like a lot more conversation needs to be had around this. I'm not quite ready to move forward with this yet. I hear and I see all of the challenges. I know that they need to be addressed, but I'm just not comfortable with it. But okay. I think I'm outvoted, so I don't know that it matters.
Well, I mean, the concern I have there, because I completely understand what you're saying, but I don't want to modify something that's broke to something else arbitrary. That this was already arbitrary, right? It was just thrown in there without the systems and support to make it successful and equitable, right? And so without what you're saying, what would we change it to? It's broken now, and the fix to me is to remove it, knowing that our administrators are going to partake in this, and that's where I'm fine if we don't include it because I trust our administrators, right? But I disagree in that it's in any way, shape, or form meaningful to have a voted statement. Where it's in policy, policy is something that's, you know, it says that our buildings are going to do this, right? And so that is something that belongs in policy, right? And so there's a difference there. I think it's arguing semantics in our case because we're fortunate. We have, you know, I have a lot of confidence that Jim and Mike and our building administrators are going to do what this says, right? So if everyone feels strongly, I'm fine approving it, removing the statement. I would prefer it be there because I think it is an actionable thing that says in policy, we expect our buildings to do this. Whereas I don't think we need to do the voted statement. I think it's, because that's, it's not the same to me. But.
And I
so can I
appreciate that.
withdraw my
Well, so
motion?
I was going to come to that. So the motion on the floor is, I think, made by Aaron, seconded by Paul, to adopt the policy as proposed, right? The amendments as proposed. Why don't we take a vote on that, see where that goes, and then we can have, if it doesn't pass, we can have an alternative motion. Just keep it simple that way. So I'll call
the one as proposed.
as proposed. That includes the statement, correct. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with that. On that motion, Paul.
Aye.
Aaron.
Nay.
Tina.
No.
Okay, Lori.
No.
And no for me. Okay, so we haven't adopted that. Is there an alternative motion that somebody wants to make?
Can I move to approve the policy as amended with striking the last paragraph?
So
Community service statement.
The community service statement.
Okay. So there's a motion to approve policy IKF graduation requirements, subject to the removal of the community service statement toward the bottom of page 1, beginning of page 2.
Which includes removing it as the 25 hours as required.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure that that's clear. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So first, I'm going to, unless somebody really needs to jump up and down, don't need further discussion on this? Okay. All right. I think so, right. All right, so let's have a vote on that. Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
No.
Lori?
Aye.
And aye for me as well. I think what I'll just say is closing comment. I think that community service statement and policy, I think that is an important issue. I have no doubt that we will continue to live that and we will sort it out through the strategic planning process. If there's a desire to work on something else that's an interim kind of like this, I think that's something we could do. I'm not advocating one way or the other at this point.
I would strongly advocate for that.
Okay.
Yeah. But because it's new policy, we couldn't necessarily do any of that tonight, right? And would it have to go
I
through
think we have a
policy
policy that if it's a new policy, it's first
Like a
reading,
double
second
read,
reading.
right?
It's not on the agenda. We have
Yep.
a policy that any new policy has two
Reads.
reads, and so that would be,
Okay.
So
that would be a violation of open meeting law and our policies.
Okay.
But other than that, it's great.
So why don't, when we get to action items, when we come back to this and talk about whether there's something we want to refer to the policy subcommittee.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
So just to round it out, I think we all are in much more agreement. I'm not on board with the process.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So
I think
let's
this is
see.
one of the first times also that we've had a disagreement, and maybe we were at a different place at 20 minutes ago, but also that usually we're all on the same page, but I actually think that this is going to push us further by disagreeing. So I think it's been a benefit.
I actually
to all
don't
of
think
us.
we're disagreeing. I think we're vehemently in agreement about, and just like disagreement, we're disagreeing on semantics of something.
I disagree. We just disagree on the process of how to move forward. That's all.
So I think everything else we're
I
in
think
vehement
everything
agreement.
else we agree with.
All right. Let's move on. Hopefully, I think that we did a good job with some lengthy conversations. Let's see if we get some quick ones. Chris, no pressure. Next item is the international exchange students tuition rate for FY23, FY24. Kind of assumed that was Chris, but
That one actually might not be me. It can be me. It's real quick. It doesn't matter. It could be Chris as well. Last year, we actually did approve having international students. We just forgot to set the rate. And we actually have a student Believe it or not, we
we
did.
did. I thought-
No, we didn't. We went back and looked at the minutes. We may have, but we couldn't find them in the minutes.
Okay.
Therefore, what we're recommending is for FY '23 and '24, because we do have students who, we have one now who was changing districts and moving into the town of Ashland. And we have folks who are looking to come here for next year. So what we've done in the past, so we're looking at a rate of $13,500 for a student, but if the student's on is ELL student, a 504, or an IEP services, we add an additional $2,000. So
What's the current rate now?
Wasn't it
12?
12,
I think it was,
yeah,
I thought
it was
12.
12,000, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's an increase of 50.
Yeah, it's been a couple years since we've had students, so, yeah.
And any questions, comments about number, how you got there?
Tommy,
Tied to change over time, because that are we, is it gonna be something that comes up, 2 years down the line where you up it for another $50?
we actually have to vote on it
Annually.
annually, yep, we have to.
Okay.
It's just like school choice students, we vote on this, so, yep.
All right. Any questions, comments? Lori, you're good? So do you have a motion?
Do you want me to actually look it up?
We will in a minute.
Hold on, I'll bring it up. I move to approve the FY '23-24 international student tuition rate of $13,500 with an additional $2,000 for students requiring ELL 504 IEP services.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Call a vote. Paul?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And Aaron, do you want to support the tuition at 13.5?
Yes. Aye.
Aye for Aaron and aye for me as well. Next item on the agenda.
That one's Chris.
This is Chris, okay. Approval of student activity club and account, AHS Red Cross Club advisor stipend and student activity account.
Sure. I think for right now, what we were doing is we're going to approve the club to get set up, but not yet the stipend.
Okay.
I think we're in a position next week where we're going to have the stipends set up for several different groups. So if
all
we
we're
could just do
doing
the
is approving the creation of the
yes,
club.
please.
Activity account, yep.
Okay, is there anything you want to say about the Red Cross Club and what it does?
Kelly?
And Kelly, I think you cut out whenever you move your head to the left.
Yep.
Not to try to.
I need a new
curtail you.
computer. Yeah, the Red Cross Club has been back and forth. It's operated a couple other times, but has never actually been established. We've had several students who, for the last several years, have been running Red Cross blood drives in school. We have one next Wednesday. Have a few spots open for people that want to give, I can't remember, the Power Red, but otherwise it is full. And they are looking at doing things, the students have done things beyond just the blood drives in terms of the club participation. I know recently they did Valentine's for an area shelter. And so they're just looking to make it a more established club and hope to continue hosting blood drives, helping the community.
Community service?
They don't get any.
Is there a motion?
I move to approve the Red Cross Club at Ashland High School and its associated student activities account. And I also authorize the principal to make deposits and withdrawals from that account. We have to authorize that as well.
Second.
Okay. And any further discussion? Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And aye for me as well.
Looks like we skipped over the account reconciliations.
Yeah, I thought that was next, but.
Oh, yeah. Is there a meeting I chair that I don't do that?
Well, same.
Yeah. Student, no, you don't, Lori, I do that. Student activity quarterly bank reconciliations. Time for glasses, new glasses.
Hi, this is the request to approve the last quarter of calendar year 2022 student activity accounts. The accounts are something that we approach quarterly basis. I've looked at them. Everything reconciles to our ledgers, to the agency banks, to our Quicken accounts. And so,
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll move to
Move to approve the school activities account.
Want to get
For
on the
the-
scorecard, huh, Lori?
Almost three.
Oh,
of us
yeah.
at the same
I don't
time.
usually get to make the motion, so I'm
Yeah.
trying to take my turn. for the period October 1, 2022 to December 31, 2022, as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
And aye for me. All right, now I can go to the mid-cycle review. Lori, I think you were taking this one, right? Superintendent's
Yeah, so
mid-cycle review?
it seems like, yeah, I'll take it just real quick because I really didn't get much feedback, which means things are going well. For those of you wondering what this is about, if you haven't tuned in prior, mid-cycle review, it's part of the superintendent evaluation process that really is a year-long process. We start in the fall, we set the goals, we check in about mid-year to see how they're going, and we give some feedback, and then we do a final evaluation at the end of the academic school year. So this is the mid-year check-in. I really only had just one comment. Tina was just looking for more progress on some of the communications goals, and I don't know if you have anything you want to elaborate, Tina. I think everybody else, I actually didn't really hear from anybody, and usually that means there's no concerns, and that you're on track, Jim, with your goals. And if anybody wants to offer anything publicly now, this would be the time.
Yeah, no, I mean, my thought and feedback, and when Jim gave us, kind of the status, I guess, of where his goals were, there were a few in the communications piece that were still at the very beginning stages or whatnot. And my question was, and I think Esmer helped shed some light on some of that now, is since that's the piece of the goal that we have a dedicated staff person for, I was surprised not to see some more progress in that space yet. And so I wanted, but per my feedback that I shared with Lori and and was shared with Jim, that my guess is there's a lot that happens behind the scenes that we don't know about. And so it would be helpful to understand more of that. Esmer certainly shared some of that tonight. Jim has shared a number of materials with me about different things that have been going on. I'd still, I want to see, obviously we want to see them all moving forward. So it's helpful to see, some of that progress and what it looks like. But knowing that as a district, we've decided to invest in a staff person to focus on that. It's I want to make sure that it's moving forward at the right clip because we've invested those resources in that. And I, wanted to better understand that.
Jim, anything you want to say regarding that? The particular goal?
Not necessarily. I think as Tina, I did email her and share a number of documents, and I'm probably a harsher critic on myself than all of you are, and I may say we're just beginning this process or that process, when in reality we're probably down the road a little bit, and I'm not ready to share certain things. Part of my comment that I had for the superintendent's update, it's part of the communication, so we'll talk about it right now. With the logo component, and I think and your initial comment was, I didn't think we were going, I thought we already had a stopgap, I thought we already had X, Y, and Z, and that may have just been the wording that I used in the sense that, well, we recognized that there were so many different logos out there, and we had to stop, and we had to say, here is our process, and we did that in the fall. That doesn't necessarily mean, what it didn't mean to me was, that has to be our be-all, end-all stopgap. Only because once you got into the look of that logo and to find out, oh, wait a minute, that logo in particular, which we were using specifically throughout the district, isn't an appropriate logo in terms of the graphic design components, the use of them on the websites, the letterheads. Therefore, we have to pivot throughout that process to say, okay, what's the next iteration that we can have so the stopgap can occur. And I didn't relay that or communicate that well, for sure. But that's the kind of stuff that Kristen, myself, and Esmer are going back and forth on, and to make sure that when we have the stopgap, it's the right stopgap until we have a longer. I didn't quite realize it would be a 18, 24-month process, right? But so when we set the goals, and we don't realize that until we get in and start having a conversation with Kristen, who does this for a living, and says, you're going to want to do a little bit more. Yeah, I want to get community input. I want student art contests. There are so many pieces of it that I want to happen with it, and we want to see quick results. But I don't think it's appropriate to have quick results in many of the communication goals. You know, when I look at the consistency of the weekly newsletters, that being said, there's still a lot of work that we feel like needs to be done with those, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. And that alone, just training our principals and getting the s'mores and getting the templates and everything set up, was months of work behind the scenes. Again, we're not just gonna, but so there's much happening, and I think more likely in the summative component. You know, I started developing, because I thought it might be easier for board members, a file with all of the goals and the evidence that if you want to go in and see, these are the things we're doing, because I've never been one to just stand on the rooftop and say, hey, we're doing great. I just don't, that's not who I am. But if there's specific concerns about a specific action, then I would hope you'd come to me and say, hey, fill me in a little bit on this, and could you report out on that a little bit? That's how I would approach it from my lens. Do I think, you know, Esmer and I had a meeting, it was a week ago, and we talked a little bit about expectations and what it is in terms of her role. It's a new role for us too, and trying to define exactly everything she should be doing and or priorities. So for instance, the budget book or the budget presentations. I can tell you that she was under a little bit of stress today because Chris and I changed it 6 times this week, literally. But that communication component isn't always front and center until it's front and center, right? Until it's out there. But there's so much work that's going behind the scenes. You know, we don't really talk a lot about the Yell nights and things like that we are doing and that we're preparing for the next one in April. But yeah, I mean, I could have been a little more communicative, just since we're in that goal, right? Of the things that we are doing and have been doing, but I would welcome anyone to come in and say, hey, what are you doing here? That's how I, you know. So.
Well, and the reason the feedback came through Lori is
Yeah,
because that's my
of course, no,
understanding
as
of
it
the
should.
okay,
No,
right,
yeah, but I think Lori would tell you too. I mean, I'm comfortable and.
Oh, hands down, and she mentioned that as well.
Come on in.
I didn't think there was need for us to
Yeah.
have any further
Yeah.
it was just a.
Yeah, but I'm. Listen, and like I said, I had written down when you made the comment about the logo component, I wanted to make sure I addressed it because I could have gone. It could have gone in a bad direction than what I was expecting even tonight, right? I mean, it was sort of, we talked about it in the past about having a stopgap. We have a branding document. That's all been developed. It's out there. Now, I think immediately, you know, coaches, Clocker Club, those organizations that participate and are associated with the Ashland Public Schools needs to get that memo immediately with the files. Now, it's not going to be immediate because we've got a little tweaking apparently to do, from Kristen, and that's okay. But within the next week, you can guarantee that those messages will go out. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything else on the mid-cycle review? And I don't know if that was also your intent, your report.
No, it's not. But
okay. So if nothing else on the mid-cycle review, do you have an update you want to share?
I do. It's been a long time since we've been here. I wanted to take a moment that is necessary, I think, as a community, to say how proud I am of this community. Before break, we had a really tough situation at Warren with one of our students passing away, and the level of care, support that our staff are at Warren in all of our buildings who immediately came to support our staff and our students. Chief Roby, Chief Rossi, the entire fire department and police department, immediate responses. I sent them a note just saying how fortunate we are as a community. It's sad. Mike and I went Monday to see staff who had a week, obviously, in between Adam's death, and there's still a lot of hurt. You can feel it, you can see it, you can sense it, but the joy that some teachers shared with me from having Adam in school these last 3 years was amazing. Like, hey Jim, come see this. I printed these out over the weekend before I came back to school because I wanted, the first time this happened or first time this happened. It gave me great sense of our community, and I want to send out our deepest sympathy to the Bazine family, but we hadn't talked about that here. We haven't shared that as a community. I almost wanted to do it at the beginning of the meeting, but I'm glad we didn't, because I think it's I think of you, Aaron, you mentioned the SEL component. I give kudos to Jen and Pete, Jen Cutler. The level of detail of preparation for eventuality of sadness or of that day or anything occurring, they were unbelievable in terms of I just walked in, I remember, into the Kate Altman's office, and Jen's got the spreadsheet. Okay, this is happening, X, Y, like this is where people need to go. Jen Shields is coming with Huxley. Like it was real. I was really proud of our staff. And you never know how people are going to react until there's adversity, like in terms of leadership. And Pete, it was, he did a hell of a job. So.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you to everybody involved. And, anybody else have anything they want to? Okay. All right. Thank you, Jim. Mike, do you want to
follow that?
Yeah.
No, I don't have anything today.
Okay. Warrant approvals, Paul?
Oh, that's me. I have to follow that.
Mm.
All right. Between February 3rd, 2023 and March 2nd, 2023, I, Paul Kendall, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $834,168.48. This includes general fund expenses of $657,897.91, revolving expenses of $160,867.11, grant expenses of $15,332.43, and meals tax expenses of $71.03. I also signed off on $1,257,900. I can't say this. $1,257,695.65 of payroll.
Thank you, Paul. Consent actions, approval of the minutes from February 2nd, 2023. Anybody have anything on the minutes? Motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? Paul?
Aye.
Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori?
Aye.
An aye for me as well. Gifts and donations?
Yeah, Ohio Pile Prints, $42.08 for miscellaneous gifts and donations. Ashland Lions Club, $500 for the AHS Leo's Club for purchase items for the food pantry, Easter baskets. Ashland K-12 PTO, $1,888 for the Ecotarium for AMS 6th grade for a total of $2,430.08.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the gifts and donations as presented.
Second.
Okay.
Aye.
Paul? Aaron?
Aye.
Tina?
Aye.
Lori? Think about it.
Aye.
Aye for me as well.
Sorry.
All right. Member updates. Let's start down. Paul?
I mean, nothing that isn't the standard. Lots of stuff going on at Mendez.
You had your walkthrough, right?
What's that?
The walkthrough.
Which one?
The cold one.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I feel like
He was on.
I feel like a tour guide nowadays. I mean, I've taken probably.
Sorry.
Yeah, Jim and I were just there today, so, I mean, just tons happening. Lots of, we have actually rooms that are painted, the lights are in, the cubbies are in, the cabinets are in, the countertops coming in next week. So, I mean, it changes so frequently. So if anybody wants to go, I believe we're having some work done this Saturday. So if you want to, after our budget workshop, we can pop over.
I might take you up on that,
Yeah.
unless it's snowing like super bad and it's not good to be on site.
It's not snowing in the building.
And we're still having a workshop.
So yeah, I mean, aside from that, I mean, you know, I could ramble on about a million things going on over there, but probably best just to see it at some point.
Tommy, you're lucky got a delay. I screwed that up.
Aaron?
No updates.
Tina?
Nope.
It seems like there's something, but I can't remember what it is, so I'm gonna let it go. I'm sorry, Lori, anything
I don't have anything to add.
from our Southern Ashland office?
Yeah.
Oh, Tommy, sorry.
So, no, I was just mentioning to Mr. Adams that they canceled championships for skiing, but he did not cancel school.
Oh, boy.
So that was just the discrepancy that I would have.
We shouldn't even have had a delay. What are you talking about?
Given the weather, that was a good call.
Yeah.
Like, we did not need a day
I was here
off.
at 4:30 in the morning, it was a bad call.
Yeah, we got like
Yeah.
2 inches. But
Yeah, I looked outside, it was just wet.
Yeah. Well, I guess I shouldn't say, it's a good call that you did not cancel school.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Right.
that's a
That's
good.
what-
That's a good call.
Yes,
Okay.
that was the good call.
All right, last thing on the agenda is action items. Does anybody want to come back to, what did I
The-
forget?
The volunteering, putting that on the action item.
Community
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I'm asking about. So what is it that we want to identify as an action in there? Is it a referral to policy subcommittee to develop something as a policy? Is it?
I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable on my own just saying, hey, this is what, or you know, this is what Lori and Paul think is good. I mean, I don't know that that's
We can just put it
helpful,
for a future
but
discussion
have
about
the-
what.
But
Session.
if we've talked about putting it on the strategic plan as far as a strategic goal,
Yeah.
and then it's actioned out of there. If it's on there as a goal, then, all right, there it is. It's a goal, and then we develop,
there, we can
we
develop
develop
a
that action
policy.
plan of what it, you know, what is it supposed to be, and then.
So
then-
we should be able to retain
if-
that thought until
Yeah.
Monday, right?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the policy is the output of a process, not the start of a process, right? So, and so I think as long as we make sure we address it on Monday to have it as, and put it as the strategic plan, to me, that's where it is, but I mean. what do
I
you
was just gonna say, if we have it as an action item, it's something we're working towards, so I think it's a good idea to put it there. If we don't, it doesn't mean we have to come up with it right now, but it's something we're working towards, so I think it's appropriate to add.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's really a way to make sure that we don't forget about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll add an
Yeah,
action
I
item.
think, Mark, if
Yeah,
I
go ahead, Laura.
could, just, and I know we're getting now closer to the end of the year than the beginning, but, you know, I think it would be helpful to also, obviously, we're gonna address it in our strategic plan, but as far as details go, like, I would like to hear from the site councils on what they think is age appropriate for their buildings. So, I mean, I know that's in your realm, Jim, of getting the word out, you know, for it to be addressed there, and whether that starts now or whether that starts in September.
Yeah,
But
no,
I'd like,
we have a leadership meeting on Monday, so we'll address it immediately there. I'll add it right to the agenda right now.
That'd be great.
Yeah, I guess my only concern about that is,
Where's your talk?
they're on a schedule to, and they have certain purviews for the school improvement plans, and I'm fine if they help them address that, what they're doing right now, you know, kind of what Jim said, that they're gonna be doing things at all levels right now. But if that doesn't align with, there's an overarching process that I think we wanna have, and I don't know that site council's cadence, and it just strikes me as those are just disjoined from that, but I'm fine if it's, hey, what do they think about how they're going to address it
I think
in
it's
the short
important
term.
to start the conversation, but I agree with you. It's not necessarily, here's what we're gonna do, and then we figure out
Yeah,
what that means for
Yeah,
our
'cause-
pol- yeah.
and it's partly, I want to message it right, because I don't want it to go down to them thinking that they have this thing that we're asking them to do, and they're deciding something, but I think they're helping to guide the building admin on what they're currently doing, which will help inform, and we want to integrate it, but you know what I mean? It's partly messaging from my perspective. I don't want it to sound like we're just putting it on them. But I agree that, you know, I don't know how else to say it.
No, well, yeah, the conversation still needs to begin with the admin team, so it's on the agenda now, I just put it on, yep.
All right. The only thing left on my agenda is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye.
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 And aye for me. Thank you, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Okay.